Hello and welcome back to this tutorial series about full-text search on entities. So far we built a little REST controller that provides our entity to the outside world, and we also created some code that actually stores our entities in a Postgres database. This episode we're going to install Apache Pulsar, and this will be needed to actually listen to all the changes that happen on the database. So actually, we're going to go to the official Pulsar website, which you can find under pulsar.apache.org. And if you've never heard of Pulsar before, Pulsar was initially developed by Yahoo, and it's kind of similar to Apache Kafka, and it can also be used as a pub/sub provider, so it's also similar to something like RabbitMQ. Again, I can highly recommend the documentation. I think it's very good. It's very extensive, so Pulsar can do a lot of different stuff, so there's a lot to read and a lot to learn. But anyway, I think it's very well written documentation. So when we go to the setup guide, this one will actually guide you through a manual setup, meaning you download the actual Pulsar binaries and install them locally. I'm not going to use this approach. I want to use Docker Compose again for the installation. So I'm just going to copy some config over. And what this will do is it will download Pulsar version 2.7.1 and use the hostname Pulsar. It will start the actual Pulsar cluster as a standalone cluster. It maps the actual ports. This means we have to change the port of our application because Pulsar by default wants to use port 8080, and it's also mapping port 6650, and it mounts in some volume. This is basically so that we don't lose all the data every time we restart the cluster. Okay, so let's give it a try. I'm just making sure that Docker Compose is not running. And yeah, this is exactly the problem I was just talking about. Quarkus by default uses port 8080, and since the application is running, it blocks actually starting. So I'm going to kill the application and directly make sure that we use another port. So I think that's Quarkus and HTTP port. Let's make it 81. And now it should start. We can actually check that the port change worked when we start the application again and change in the browser to 8081. And yeah, there it's back again. And when we take a look at our Pulsar cluster, Pulsar is quite chatty, so it will print out a lot of stuff. But that looks good. That looks actually pretty good. And to test if it actually worked, I'm gonna do the same as given here in the documentation to getting started. So since we're running Pulsar in a Docker container, we actually have to log into this Docker container because locally we don't have Apache Pulsar. So running this on my local machine would obviously not work. To do that, we first have to find the name of our Docker services. So I'm just going to make that full screen for a second. So at the moment, we have two running instances of Docker services. One is named Docker Pulsar 1, and one is our database named Docker Postgres 1. So to understand how these names are constructed, by default, they take the name of the folder where your Docker Compose file is, so in this case, Docker, and connect it with an underscore with the service name, so Postgres and Pulsar, and also attach a number to it. So once we know that our Pulsar service actually has this name, we can connect to it with a simple command, which is docker exec -it, then the service name, so docker pulsar 1, and what we actually want to run there, it's a bash terminal. So as you can see, the prompt here changed, meaning I'm currently at the root inside of this Pulsar container. And I'm not at the root directory, I'm already at /.pulsar. So when we look around, we basically see the default Pulsar setup. And from here we can basically move it back and follow the tutorial as given here. So you can see it runs some command in the bin, some executable in the bin folder to subscribe to some topic. And when I copy that over, it will on the fly create a consumer that is listening to this also newly created topic named my topic, and it registers itself with the name first subscription. After that, we can basically do the same to connect to create a producer that actually writes into this topic. So I'm going to use it from here, and we basically need the same command that we used here. So I'm going to copy that over. And again, this terminal is now running, will run all the commands inside of the Docker container. And I'm going to copy over this producer code, which will actually produce a message with the string hello Pulsar into this topic named my topic. And we expect that this terminal window receives it and actually prints out the message that we just wrote. So copy that over. And yeah, basically both end after the producer ends after sending this message, and the consumer also ends after receiving one message. So you see here, got message, and it has no key, it has no properties, and the content is hello Pulsar, and this is exactly the message that we sent here. So our basic setup is working. Great. So in the next episode, we are going to add Debezium to Pulsar, and with that we will be able to catch changes from the database and write them into a topic created by Pulsar. So see you there.